Hello, my name is Megan, as I'm sure you already know, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about my disciplinary literacy and equity project. So, I used one of the examples that was provided in the instructional outline, and I actually decided to make a position statement for the history department at SPHS, which is where I will be student teaching in the spring. So my position statement basically states that in the history department at SPHS, the teachers use instruction that is both equitable and actionable. I further broke down the position statement into two separate parts. One of the parts being that we teach history through a culturally responsive lens, and the other part being that we teach history with hopes of inspiring activism in our students. So in the first part of my position statement, as I'm sure you can tell, I drew really heavily from Moji and Hinchman's article, Culturally Responsive Practices for Youth Literacy Learning. I chose to really hone in on this practice of critical literacy because I think it plays a really large part in the role of equity in the classroom. I think that culturally responsive teaching is both equitable in the sense that it encourages students of all learning abilities and all identities to bring what they have to the table while still feeling safe and secure. But I also find that it's equitable, or at least touches upon equity or works towards equity, because it does serve as a bridge to learning critical literacy and to achieving proficiency in critical literacy, which, as we know from other readings that we've done in the class, has a huge role in, or part in, bringing creating a more equitable world and creating education that is, or a learning experience, I should say, that is equitable. I also really like this practice of culturally responsive teaching because I think it provides multiple means of engagement, which the Universal Design for Learning Guidelines explicitly states as one of those really large facets of learning in the classroom for students. And I really believe that culturally responsive teaching recruits interest, sustains effort and persistence, as well as encourages self-regulation in students, which are all aspects of education that pertain to all learners rather than just one kind of learner. The second part of my position statement, or the idea that we work to inspire activism in our students through teaching history, draws heavily from Berman's article on teaching about language power and text. It references specifically the idea that taking action is a large part of critical literacy, or proficiency in critical literacy, which I really like. I think, as I said earlier, culturally responsive teaching really does serve as that bridge to critical literacy, specifically that last step of critical literacy, as Berman describes in their article, that step of taking social action and taking, fighting for justice and fighting for equity. Alongside my position statement, I provided some tips that I felt really embodied my position statement that could be used in the classroom to make instruction similar to what I state is important to the teachers in the SPHS history department. One of those tips is that you should include a text at the beginning of your lesson or unit plan that you feel it aligns with your students' identity and interests without making general assumptions. So you do have to get to know your students a little bit before you can implement this tip, but I do think it's really important to creating that bridge to a lesson or a unit plan that is actionable for your students, that your students can understand and take action towards after, going through that plan. The second tip says that you should end a unit plan on an activity that explores the dynamics of power and language and privilege in a text or in a material, a class material. And I think that these two tips combined really connect culturally responsive teaching with that aspect of critical literacy, while sandwiching in and incorporating in some of the curriculum-based activities that you have to use, I think, when you start with something engaging and end with something that is actionable, you really create a lesson or unit plan that is very meaningful for your students.